We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Aleph, volume 21. This is the third Sicha for the Parshas Yisro. The Rebbe discusses here the differences between the Mechilta's language and Rashi's language, in which the Torah says not to walk up on steps, but rather on a ramp when you go up to the Mizbeach. And this has to do with not degrading and the Mizbeach and Rashi learns and the Mechilta learn from this that how much more so if you're not allowed to even degrade or shame the stones that don't understand, that don't know difference between yeah and no, or according to Rashi says they don't care about their degradation. So how much more so, how much you have to be careful in another person, make sure not to shame them. But the Rebbe will point out there's differences of languages between Rashi and the Sifri, and the Rebbe will explain that the Sifri goes according to his understanding, and Rashi is a little different. The Rebbe explains very well a few seemingly extra words in Rashi, which are hard to sort of figure out what Rashi means, and the Rebbe shows how everything is exactly precise. But let's go step by step. Aleph, Yisro, Gimel Aleph, B'siyum Parshasenu, in the end of our Parsha, that's in the end of Parshas Yisro. From Pasik, the Torah says over there that about the Mizbeach, it says, not to walk on steps onto the altar, onto the Mizbeach, so that Asher loisigole ervoscha olav, so that your erva shall not be revealed on the Mizbeach, walking up the stairs. If you walk up the stairs, then your feet stretch apart, and then there could be revealing ervoscha, and we don't want that to happen. So the Torah says use a ramp instead. So Zog the Mechilta says, "Baridvorim kal v'chomer," but these words we can learn them as a foretory how we need to treat other people. Uma im avonim shein bahem das. Since we see that even stones which have no understanding, not for the bad and not for the good, they're inanimate. There's no feelings and there's no understanding there. But yet, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, Loi tenaheg bohem minag bizoyin. Don't treat them in a degrading way. So therefore, chavirecha shehu b'dmuse shel misha amar v'hoya ha'olam. So your friend, another person who is in the image of the one who said and created the world, dinhu. So that's a foretory for sure. Shaloi tinhag boy minhag b'zoyin, not to conduct with him in a degraded, in a custom, in a way of degradation. This is the language of the Sifri. Let's look in Rashi. This foretory is brought down in Rashi as well. But there is some change. Rashi changes something and Rashi adds. This is what Rashi says. Uma havonim halolu sha'im bahem das lehakpid al bizyonom. Rashi says these stones, they have no understanding to care about their degradation. Omra Torah, yet the Torah says, Hoyil v'yesh bahem tzorech, since there is a need in them. And this would be the whole Sikha. The Rebbe will explain what does it mean here. Who is the tzorech? Why yes tzorech? Why does Rashi bring this down? But the Rashi says, since there is a need in those stones, the Torah says, "Loi tenag b'hem minag bizoyin." Don't conduct yourself in a degrading way, in a minag bizoyin. So when we talk about a friend of yours who is in the image of your creator, image of Hashem, and cares about his degradation. How much more so? So the Rebbe now is going to show the differences that Rashi changes and adds to the Sifri. Some of the changes are understandable. Das was Rashi zog dem Loshen. The fact that Rashi uses the language she'ein bohem das lahakpid al bizyonim. These stones don't have the understanding to care, to be particularly about their degradation. And this is anders with the Loshen HaMechilta. This is different than the language in the Mechilta. Over there it says she'ein bohem das loy l'rov loy l'teva. Over there, it just says they have no knowledge for the good, not for the bad, and not for the good, as opposed to Rashi says they don't have the knowledge to care about their degradation. So that change is mubam bepashtos. That we understand very simply. Weil durch madgish zayin dem heder habizoyin by avonim, because through Rashi's emphasizing that the stones don't have shame, doesn't just say they don't have knowledge, they don't know for good or the bad, but specifically, we want to make a kal v'chomer that you're not allowed to shame your friend. So we want to emphasize through this them heder habizoyin ba'avonim, the lack of shame when it comes to stones, benigud, as opposed to bizoyin v'sizdo b'chaverecha, to the shame which exists by your friend. Is bepashtus musbar und starker der kal v'chomer. So that is very simply, it's understood, explained, and it makes the kal v'chomer stronger, not just by saying they don't know the difference between good and bad, but by saying specifically, and they don't care about being degraded. So your friend that cares, and that's why Rashi says also by the friend, time is when it talks about your friend, Moishiv, the Werter, which don't say in the Mechilta, also says, Umakpit albis yoino. He cares, he's particular about his shame. Those are in other words in Mechilta, because that's the contrast and that's the foretory in a more direct and a precise way that stones don't care about their shame, and yet the Torah says to take care of them, not to act in a degrading way. So certainly your friend that does care, you shouldn't act in a degrading way. So that change we understand. There's another change. Rashi changes in the language. Your friend who's in the image of your creator versus the Mechilta. In the image of the one who said and created the world. We understand what Rashi emphasizes is val yoitzrecha, because as your creator, red kiposhut wegen dem yoitzer von dem oila b'mailis, because we're not just talking about Hashem, but we're saying he is created in the image, the one who's going up, in the one that created him. From them was oila b'mailis, and we're trying to say how much you need to be careful with that particular person. So Rashi changes it from Mishamar Vaya Olam to Yoitzrecha. But there's one issue that we don't understand. Abados was Rashi is Moisif of Loshen HaMechilta. But this that Rashi adds to the language of the Mechilta. Omra Torah, so the Torah says, Ho Yil V'yesh Bahem Tzorech, since there is a need, the need in this stones, Tzorech Lohavi. That we need to understand. Vos gitzu der Tzorech from the Avonim. What does it add? The fact that there's a need for these stones in the Hasbaras HaKavachimer b'negei chaverecha, to explain the foretory with regards to your friends, that because you need the stones, How does that relate? Does not found in Mechilta. The Mechilta doesn't say that. Rashi adds that, but what does Rashi mean to say that because you need the stones, so, but we're trying to say about the Kal V'chomer that we learn that the fact that you have to respect even stones must respect a person, but whether the stones are there for a purpose or not, doesn't seem to have any bearing. And we'll see, the Rebbe will explain to us all this beautifully as we go on in this year. But first, the Rebbe is going to explain that we find this particular caution about the Mizbeach, but we don't find it about anything else. We just say, like, to Goler, Voscha, love is going on the Mizbeach. What about other elevations that you're going up? They don't have ramps over there. They had stones over there. And Take, the Mechilta introduces this Kal V'chomer by first pointing out a difference between the general Beis Hamikdash and this Mizbeach, because in essence, as the Rebbe will ask, what kind of a Kal V'chomer is it? The ramp, the Mizbeach, is something which is holy. So acting in a degrading way, we know B'chlal with holiness, you're not allowed to act in a degrading way. A human being, yes, you have to honor him, but maybe this issue of Leitigoler Voscha only applies to a place of the Mikdash. But in Mechilta, it's understood, and that's why Rashi has to add the tzarech. Let's look inside. We'll understand it by first introducing the difference vider pirushu limud hakosuf, as the interpretation and how we learn the verse in Velchem Ezogdom Kal V'chomer Hanalim, by which we say the Kal V'chomer. So this Kal V'chomer is based on a verse. So the verse is in the pasuk Asher Lo Yisro. So we have to understand the pasuk. So the way there is a difference, the way it's explained is Mevuir in Mechilta, Vidos is Musbar in Pirush Rashi. The way it's in the Mechilta and the way it's explained in Rashi. Because the Mechilta learns the pasuk a little different than does Rashi, so in the Mechilta we don't have a need to have these extra words because the Mechilta is understood, but in Rashi it needs. In Mechilta state frier, in before this Kal V'chomer, it starts before that in the Mechilta, Asher loy tigole ervoscha olav. So the pasuk says, should not be revealed your erva olav on him, on that stones, on the elevation to the Mizbeach. And the Mechilta learns the word is olav is exclusion. It's a qualification that only olav, but not in other places. Olav I ato peseya psiya gaso. On the Mizbeach, you cannot take a big step, which would be Megaler Voscha. Avol ato peseya, and that's why we have the rap. Avol ato peseya psiya gaso beheichel v'kodesh hakadoshim. But in the Heichel, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, over there's no prohibition against a Psiya Gasa. That's why it says Olav, Leitegala or Voscha Olav, only on the Mizbeach. But the Mechilta says, why do we need the exclusion? Without an exclusion, we would actually say a Kal V'chomer. Since the ramp, the Mizbeach, which is less holy than the rest, than the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you don't, and you're not allowed to do these big steps. So for sure, you shouldn't be allowed to do it in the Heichel and in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Shahoya Bedin, because it would be by right, halachically, we should say, Uma im Mizbeach Hakal. since we see that even the Mizbech, which is lighter, also Lifsoya by Psio, it is prohibited to take these big steps. We talk about the Heichel, the room in which the Beis Hamikdash, all the Kalim are, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the Holy of Holies, they are more chomur than the Mizbech, which is on the outside. So Dinush also lives soya psia gasot. There should be for sure that you should not be allowed to step a big step behind lefishein chamuri because they're more serious. So because that would be the conclusion, that's why the pasuk specifically excludes them. Talmud loymar asher loisu gorle ervoscha olav. So the pasuk teaches us that it should not be revealed on him on the mizbeach. On him, on the Mizbeach, you cannot step an extra step. But you can step an extra step. And after the Mechilta has this limud, and then he says the foratory, so the Mechilta makes it right away clear that this is unique about the Mizbeach. As the Rebbe will explain, that the Mechilta is coming to answer that how could you learn a Kal V'chomer from the Mizbeach, which is Kodesh? So he shows you that even the Beis Hamikdash, you're allowed to do that. So it can't be the reason because it's holy. Then why would you allow to go so in the Beis Hamikdash? So we have to say that the Mizbeach has a special status that the Torah doesn't want you, but it's not because of the sanctity of it. So therefore, we can learn a foratory for a person because can't say that the Mizbeach, you have to be careful not to do the big steps because it's Kodesh, Mashenkin a person. No, we prove to you L'chatchila that it's nothing to do with the Kedusha, because if it was Kedusha, it would be everywhere. It has to do with Mizbeach. That's what you learn on That's what the way we learn the Mechilta. But Rashi doesn't bring this down. So how do we learn, according to Rashi, this Kal V'chomer from the Mizbeach, which is Kodesh? And that's why Rashi brings down Yisro. Let's look at that. Ober Rashi. First, the Rebbe says that Rashi B'Ascholos Pirushei, where his Masbir and Posik, in the beginning of his commentary from the Kal V'chomer, in which he explains the verse, is Mefarish. He says, if you have steps, then you need to widen your steps. Now, even though it's not actually revealing the erva, they would wear like coats over them. But the Kohanim had pants. They had pants out of linen. So it's not going to be a Gilu Erva. And yet Rashi says, is making wide step. This is close to revealing the Erva. And you are conducting in them a minhag, a custom of degradation. It's embarrassment. So first the Rebbe is going to explain the Mechilta that we do understand, and then we will see that in Rashi we have a problem with the Kal V'chomer. Those was their Kal V'chomer hanau kumti Mechilta. This that the above foratory in the Mechilta comes gleich noch dem miud. This comes immediately after the exclusion. All of I ato peseya psia gasa avolapto peseya chulu beichlu v'kodesh hakadoshim. That he says that over there you're not allowed to do a big step, but you could do a big step in the kodesh hakadoshim. This answers is yesh loimar, so we can say as the mitvert bavorim was we can fragen that this answers us that we would be able to have a question. If we just bring the Kavachayma, we would understand that Yisro from Leisegala Ervoscha Olav, that prohibition of not revealing Ervoscha on the Mizbeach, Letinak Bahaminik Bezoya, not to conduct yourself in a degrading, in a shameful way, is L'chayra nit mitzad di avnei Mizbeach mitzad atzmam. That is not that you're shaming stones, just stones on their own, just because of the stones. Nor to leave them, but that would be because vazayendik atel from mizbeach umigdosh, being that they are a part of the mizbeach and the Beis Hamikdosh, is thus an inyan from kedushas v'yiras hamizbeach. So then it becomes an idea of the sanctity and the fear of the mizbeach, was is verbunden mit kved Hashem, which is tied to the honor of Hashem. Was his shoyre of Mizbeach Mikdash, which rests on the Mizbeach and the Mikdash. So it's not just stones; it's stones that are part of the Mizbeach and the Mikdash. It's the sanctity and the fear and the awe you have to have for Hashem that you have for the Mizbeach, which is the service of Hashem. Al derech with the mitzvah from Meir Mikdash Bechlal, similar to the mitzvah of fearing of the Mikdash in general. We say you have to go, you can't walk with your shoes on the Harabais. There's different in the shul, in the Beis Hamikdash, was loimin Hamikdash at the Yorei. It's not that you have the fear, the yira, the awe for the Mikdash. But to the one who rests his divine in that place, as the Sefer HaMitzvahs brings down. And to use the language that the Chinuch says, as this is likvoya b'nafshei seinu, this is to set in our hearts, yiras hamokim baruch hu, the awe for Hashem, blessed be He, v'chashivus, and His importance. V'al kein huz harnu, and that's what we have been warned, not to be lightheaded in no matter because of the Eibishter, because of the Amokim that is there. So, since that's the reason for respecting and not degrading the Mizbeach, from the Avonim, so how could you from these stones uplearn a Kavochemer to learn a forator b'negei chaverecha, as it relates to your friends? The baldas by the avonim is the akedusha was in the toba chaverecha, because these stones have a sanctity that does not exist by your friend. So the Sifri is coming to forewarn that by his earlier statement. We understand. Since we had already earlier learned that it's only on the Mizbeach that you can't take these big steps. But you could take big steps in the Heichel, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That proves to us that has nothing to do really with the Kedusha. Because if it was the Kedusha, as you would think, as we thought, then why would you be allowed to do it in the Heichel, the Kodesh HaKadoshim? But because according to that thought that it has to do with the sanctity, adosis verbunden mit kvod hamikdash v'chulu, that it's associated, tied to the honor of the mikdash, well, there is gedaft chal sein, that prohibition, a big step needed to rest also in the Heichel, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. For sure, noch starker, even more, with a foratory. Because they're more stringent on Mizbech, they should have been also under this prohibition. But the Torah rejects that. The Torah says, Allah, but you're allowed to do Psir Gas. Is there fun move on? As there is fun v'lo so it's understood that this prohibition not to go up, Goimer is not belois to leave them, but das is a chelik from the Mikdash. It's not just because it's a portion of the Mikdash, nor be iker, but mainly mitzad the avnei hamizbeach atzma, because of the stones of Mizbeach himself. Ubemela, and therefore, kemen from them uplanen akal v'chaymer. So therefore, we could learn a foratory. Umay im avonim shein bohem das leil rov leil toivo. Since we see that these stones that have no das, not for the bad, not for the good, as the Mechilta says, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, David says, Lo tenahe bohem in the avonim gufel, not bohem in these stones, not because of the mission of the Mikdash. Minek bezoyen, chaverecha chulu, your friend Dinu should lo tinuk by minek bezoyen. For sure, you should not conduct yourself a way to treat it in a minute of degradation. But now, the Mechilta, in his initial explaining of the pasuk, brought out this idea that in the Beis Hamikdash and in the Heichal you're allowed to walk, and it's only excluding the miz, and only one you're not allowed to do it is on the Mizbeach. So that tells us that it's not something about the Kedushas Hamikdash, but in Rashi, we don't have that limud of the Mechilta. Rashi just says that it's a respect. So, according to Rashi, how is this a foratory for a person? And that's why Rashi needs to add these extra words, Yeshbam Tzedek, to explain this, and the Rebbe will explain. Gimel. Based on this, we'll also understand Rashi is why Rashi adds in his commentary the words Amra Torah, the Torah says, Hoyil v'yesh b'hem tzorich lo tenayig b'hem minag b'zoyin. Since there is a need, don't conduct yourself a custom of shame, degrade. About as in Pirush Rashi vet nider monder miut. Since in Rashi it's not mentioned this exclusion, all of yato piseya, that you can't only on the mizbech you can't put the big steps. Aval apato piseya. So what's the explanation? Das was man lernt up from Avnei Mizbeach, this that we learn from the stone of the Mizbeach as metornit mevaze zayin at zweit niden, that you're not allowed to degrade or shame another yid, in of itself is like a little surprising. Are we talking about a regular level of shaming? That's a Torah prohibition. We don't need a Kal V'chaimer for that. The L'chera Tamua, it seems surprising. Then do we then need to come on to a foratory from the stones of the Mizbeach? So, why is that? Because we're not really talking a very clear and open shame. Isvaldo by Avnei Mizbeach, because here by the stones of the Mizbeach, Retzich nit wegen abizoyin kipshutei, we're not talking about a literal shame. Nor blois b'lashoin Mechilta v'Rashi, but just as the language in the Mechilta and Rashi, minhag bizoyin. It's a custom of bizoyin. Sai mitzad di avonim, because both from the perspective of the stones, they don't feel no shame. What does it mean, shaming? There's no shaming over there. There's no feeling of shame. When we talk about shame, it's the feeling of shame. Is an inyan ikrim bezoyin. That's a main aspect of shame. Bizas loit ein svarin Gemara. There is, according to one idea in the Gemara, is the ganze chiyuv from Boishes Davke. When is there a obligation for shaming someone? Is when es is faran kisufa, if he feels shame. Aber bisha yoshon v'meis, if he shames him while he's sleeping or while he's dead, that's not shaming. Because the zweiter hat came on and gefühlt the busha, the other one never felt the shame, is man potter. So one opinion says that you'll be potter. So first of all, the feeling of shame is a main part of the shame. It doesn't have it by stones. We don't have that feelings. And also because of the act of the shame. What is he doing already over here? We're not discussing here conducting himself in a lightheaded way. Because if we're talking lightheadedness and actual degradation is also is prohibited in the entire area of the Mishkan and the Mikdash, including the Mizbeach. Now, that's employs wegen Minhag Bizoyin, a Minhag Bizoyin. A Meise, which means what it means, Meise was can ausgeteilt werden. It's an act that can be interpreted via Inyan Shebezoyin as if it's a matter of a shame. Rashi zogt, and Rashi says, as by Oilo b'mailis, when you going up on the step, doisni talking gilu erva mamash. It's not really revealing the erva, nor korev ligilu erva. It's close. So, what we are not trying to learn here about real shame, that's also from the Torah. That's not what we're saying. We're trying to say when there's really no shame, it's only an act that is similar, close to that. It can be interpreted as that, as shame, as the disrespect. And from this we learn with regards to his friend as a Stornit Zain, a Maise was his blois a minhag b'zoyin. You're not allowed to do an act which is only a minhag, looks like a custom of b'zoyin. Und viele, wenn der zweite viel dabei nicht kein busho b'zoyin, even if the other person hasn't feel no shame and no degradation over there, still we learn it out from the Mizbeach because there is no real prohibition against that, but we learn it at Kal V'chomer from the Mizbeach being that it doesn't feel anything, and yet we still told Leisala b'madlis al Mizbechi, and you're not really doing something degrading, and yet we shouldn't do that as a Kal V'chomer by a person. But even when he doesn't feel the busho bezoyin, that he doesn't feel the shame and the degradation, even though it says that your friend, as the lashon is, who it says that that's different. That he cares about the bezoyin, but in this case, he doesn't feel. Even in the case where he doesn't feel the bezoyin. And in them is der chiluk zwischen the Mechilta and Rashi in was besteht der Yisro. So here we have the difference between the Mechilta and Rashi. What is the prohibition here? The Dasa Mechilta besteht der Yisro in Pula Sa'odam. According to the Mechilta, it is the act of the person. Mentor afilu niton amaise, that you're not allowed to even do an act, was his nit kemaise bezoin, which is not an act of shame, nor bloiza minag bezoin, just a custom, a way of bezoin. But Rashi pshat ken azoin nit lernen. Rashi can't learn so. Forum lifize is the token tam zu mechalik sein zwischen Avnei Mizbeach und Avnei Heichel. If it is even not allowed to do an act which is not a bizoyin, but it's only a minhag bizoyin, so why is there a difference? Why can you do this for the stones of the Heichel. Not only, why does the Torah just say the Mizbeach and not the Heichel? Der Fun was der Isur is Dafke by Avne Mizbeach, because of the prohibition, is only by the stones of Mizbeach is verstandig, so it's understood as mitzad peula so odom alein volt ken Isur nit given. That if it's just the act of the person, there would be no Isur. Warum das is nicht given ken emeser meise bezoyen. This was not a real act of shame. So this would not really count as an act of shame. And therefore there would be no Isur. And that's why by the Mizbeach, by the Heichel, is not a problem. But nor by the Avnei Mizbeach is no, but there's something specific by these stones of Mizbeach. Since there's a need in them, and we're still going to explain what the Yesh B'hem Tzorech is. But since there is a Tzorech, was mitzad them is der minag bezoyen, the act of bezoyen goyrem amein kisufa. It's similar to a shame by divos darfen onkommen to the avonim, for those who need to come on to the avonim, as we say later on, the is also. And the Rebbe is going to explain, we're talking about the Kohanim that have to use the stones of the Mizbeach. In order to get onto the Mizbeach, the Kohanim that served, they would have to go up those stones. So that is a tzorech, and that would cause the degradation. In the other places that the Rebbe will explain in the next ois, they didn't have to get to the Heichel, they didn't have to go through the steps. So, therefore, in the Mechilta, as the Rebbe said, there's no Hoil B'yesh B'hem Tzorech over there. There is an act, even a Maise B'zoyin, a Minik B'zoyin, and that's why you shouldn't go on the steps of the Mizbech. Why doesn't it apply to the rest of it? Is because it's an extra thing that we find by the Mizbeach. The Torah, it's not, but in Rashi, we can't make that distinction between Mizbeach and the Heichel. Why only by the Mizbeach? So Rashi makes another distinction that really nothing is happening here from the perspective of what the person is doing. But the issue is here because there is a Tzorach. But by the Avnei Mizbeach, is do a inyan miyuchad, by the stone of the Mizbeach, there's something, and that's why there is a shame by those who need to come on to the stone, and that's why it's awesome. Rebbe explains what that's Vorabasa. Since there is in them a need, make the Rashi to Zog. Rashi means to say, as the Kohanim canon liton zeir avodah of Mizbech, that the Kohanim are not able to do their service on the Mizbech, nor seiden durch zeir oile sein, unless they go up by going on the stones. This is the reason why you shouldn't conduct with them. A minig of bezoyen. Weil durch neuig sein, a minig bezoyen, by conducting yourself in a degrading way, b'shaychus, to the Avnei HaMizbeach, to the stones of the Mizbeach, you're impacting also the Kohanim who need to go up there. Is men bederech memele oich mevaze, the Kohanim was dafen onkommen to the Avonim. Then you are shaming also the Kohanim that need those Avonim. The Dugmas, this is similar, but it's not actually Loy Mamish. It's brought down in the earlier Legabe Chiyuv Tashlumim from Boishas, with regards to the payment of Boishas. So we say, if you spit on someone, as there been the Rokak Bevigdei Potter, if you spit on somebody's garment, you'll be exempt. So Rishonim say is dafke when the mizbayish od b'shas ma'aser then beged nit gitrog. It's only if the one who's being shamed hasn't been wearing that garment, so then you would be exempt. That's not shame. That's not embarrassment. Oy, but it is done based on the kicking when ongeton in the beged. But if at the time that he was spitting, he was dressed in that garment, say the Rishonim, is the Rekik Chayiv, the one who spits will be obligated. Because when he spit from beged, the garment, hat der Beweise given the mention was is given ongeton in beged. That shamed the person that was dressed in the garment. Since you're wearing the garment, so even though there is no shame for the garment, but there's a shame for the person wearing the garment. So the kohen who has to go up on those steps, that makes it an embarrassment for the kohen itself. And this will only apply to the stones. Yesh b'hem tzorech. There's a need. There's no way to get up there, because the other places in the base, there were other ways to get there. Mashenkin the milas paran hechel, as opposed to the steps that were in front of the hechel, is ein b'hem tzorech. There's no need in them. While number one, men can onkommen in hechel niet door the milas. You can reach the hechel not through these steps. Base. Number two, the milas are given nit lifnei hahechel, who the avodah is talking about. They weren't actually right in front of the hechel, which you were doing the avodah, but lifnei ha'ulam. The ulam was the room, the big room in front of the hechel. Kum b'meila oy. So it turns out that the lichas hakohanim zum hechel through the milas lifnei ha'ulam is when the kohanim went to the hechel through the steps that were in front of the ulam. Is nit kim chelik and tzorech from zer avodah behechel. That's not a part and a need of their service in the Hechel. That's to get to the Ulam, to get to the Hechel, but not the Mashenkim by Mizbeach, as opposed to Mizbeach, is doch der Keves HaMizbeach, the Keves HaMizbeach, Atel Mizbeach Gufa. The ramp of the Mizbeach becomes a part of the Mizbeach. Bis as the Posik sagt, Leisale b'malis al Mizbeach, not my Mizbeach. In other words, the steps of the ramp is the steps that would be there if there wasn't a ramp would be on the mizbeach. Asher loy tikole ervoscha. All of that means that it's an integral part of the mizbeach. On the reggang of the milas of the kevesh to mizbeach, to go up by steps or the ramp to the mizbeach, werd gerechen wer is a mizbeach gufa. It's considered as if you're on the mizbeach itself. So from this we also learn with regards to the degradation, the shame of your friend. Even though it's only a conduct of bizoyan, even though it did not actually create a shame, a degradation in actuality, but still, bibald as who bidmus yotzro, since he's in the image of your creator, it turns out, as mit minig bezoyen legabe chaveirei, when you conduct yourself in a custom of degradation with regards to your friend, is as an inyan from bezoyen klape yotzrecho, that becomes a degrading towards Hashem. Al derech be the beim isur leisale b'mailas hamizbeach. Just like over there, you can't go up and steps on the mizbeach. Was der minag bezoyin b'shayches to the avonim, even though as it relates to the stone, bring that bezoyin for the kahanim, brings for the kahanim. Here, the bezoyin for your friend brings a degradation for Hashem, just like over there, the degradation for the stones brings the bezoyin for the kahanim. So here, the Rebbe explains now the lotion of what are we saying by the person that he cares about. He cares about the degradation. Zayin. We can also understand Rashi's language when Rashi gives the Kavachemer. Uma avonim halolu she'ein bahem das lahakpid al bizyonom. These stones don't have any understanding to be particular to care about the shame. Omra Torah. Torah says, Hoy uyesh behem tzorech. Since there is a need, loy tenag behem mineg bizoyin, don't treat them in a degrading way. Chaverecho shu bidmus yitzrecha. Your friend who is in the image of your created, umakpid al bizyoinoi. And normally, generally speaking, he's makpid, not in this case, but generally, alachas kama v'kamo, that we have to be careful not to even do minhag bizoyin. And Rashi says, nitvi mechilto v'ashteit nider loshen lahakpid al bizyoino umakpid al bizyoino. These additions, as the Rebbe brought down before, the Riber is Rashi Masbi, the mit is Rashi Masbi, what Rashi explains here. Ma doch bayavonim alolu she'ein behem das lahakpid al bizyoino. Since these stones have no understanding to be caring about their degradation, so there's never an issue of shame for stones. So at all, it does not exist such a thing as shame. Because if you don't care about the degradation, so you won't degrade it. It's not only that you don't care, but if you don't care, then you won't embarrass. And yet the Torah says, so the Kohanim, because there is a need for the Kohanim, this is considered as a custom bezoyan. For sure, you're not allowed to conduct yourself with a custom of shame, degradation, with you as your friend. Why? Number one, he's in the image of your creator. The Sichos zwischen ihm mit Yitzrecha is Yashir v'Nikar. The connection between the person and with the creator, with Hashem, is direct and recognizable. Nit via Avnei Mizbech and Kahanim v'Somet Tzvishes Niske Sichos b'Dmusim v'Chulu, not as the stones of the Mizbech, which Yesh B'Hem Tzorech is because of the Kahanim, so there is really no connection between them in the way they look. So you and Hashem look b'dmus, you're in his creator. And number two, makpid al bizyoiner. Generally, he's makpid al bizyoiner. B'meili zoich mitzadim gufo ken zayin a mitzias from bizyoiner. There could be an existence, there exists shame, not that he was shamed over here. Mashenkin ba'avnei hamizbeach mizbeach ba'velchos is iber hoip nitokim bizyoyer mitzad avonim atzmom. By the avnei mizbeach, there is no such a thing as shame from the avonim atzmom. So even over there, the Torah cares about their shame for the Kohanim because yesh b'hem tzorech. So alachas kama v'kama, by a person which has conceptually the idea of shame, and he looks in the image of Hashem, you have to be careful not even a minhag b'zoyin. Ches, Pirush Rashi al Torah is dokieno shel Torah. Rashi's interpretation of the Torah is the wine of Torah. Is yesh loimar, as in the Pirush Rashi b'siyum parsha, that in this commentary of Rashi, which concludes the portion of Yisro, everything goes by the end, is merumas that ikar v'toichen from Klolus HaSedra is hinted the main and the contents of the Sedra in general, the inyan from Matan Torah Aseres Adibros. The idea that the parsha of Yisro talks about Matan Torah, 10 Commandments, is summed up in the end in this way to treat another person. Keshem bidas Aseres Adibros, seinen Koilo, nit nor di Dibros, vunonoichi havaya lekechun lo yilo. Just as the 10 sayings, they include not only the spiritual and mitzvahs between Hashem in the highest level and the Yidden, I am God, your God. You should be no Avodah Zorah, the Hechstin Yonim and Achdus Hashem. These are the highest levels, matters in the unity of Hashem. But the says the difference include also the later sayings, which are very simple, till extent that they are the very simple matters between a person and a person. Like tirtzach, not to kill, like tinaf, not to be noyef, everything that belongs, not to be jealous, everything that belongs to your friend. So just like in Torah, it includes the loftiest level of the Parshas Yisro and the end of the Aseret HaDibros in the Ten Commandments. We have also the very simplest of sayings, as is in Pirush Rashi. Same thing is in the Rashi's commentary, which is Torah Shabbal Peh, which is the oral Torah. Is there so from Parshas Yisro? So what is the end of the portion of Yisro? V'yas darf zayin the zehirus betachlis. There needs to be the total care in inyonim pshutim, in very simple matters, funan hogis, benodem lachavera, from treating the conduct between a person and his friend. Bis zu zayin oizgi, to the extent to be careful, afila from minhag bizoyin, even just a minhag, a way of bizoyin, not an actual bizoyin. Kishem v'didvorim pshutim in the Aseret HaDibros. Just like these simple sayings in the 10 sayings, eine nit kein besondere Sach von the erste Dibros. They're not something separate from the first 2 sayings. So all the sayings are part of the 10 sayings. Nor we are clear become mekoimes, but as explained in many places, as those was men hat die Sachen da reingestellt in the Aseret HaDibros. But the reason that these simple laws were placed in the 10 sayings is euch zu lernen, is also to teach us, as is ein inyan mit hanoicha Hashem Elokecha. They're really one idea together with the first, I'm God, your God. Euch the dvarim sheben odom l'chaveirei, also those items that are between man and his friend, seinen be'emes ben odom l'mokim. In truth, they are between the person and Hashem. Men darf sein nizer in zei, you have to be careful in them. This is the Rotzen Hashem. This is what Hashem wants. That the things that your simple things is also not because they're simple, you do them on your own, but you do them because this is the Rotzen Hashem. Is Oyich Rashi Meisif. So just like we say with the God said as a Dibris, as the Zehiris Klape Chaverecha, that being careful by your friend is the Farva said is Bismus Yitzrecha. Is the image of you created. It ties it to the Eibush there, even the Ben Odom Lachavera. The Shaykhis Isur to Ben Odom Lamoket, that connects this prohibition to in between a person and Hashem. Is nit nor mitzadem tzivui. It's not just the connection. It's not just because of the command. Amendav zayin nizar in the yonim mitzad tzivui Hashem. But you got to be careful because Hashem told you, so it becomes a command. But it's rather because your friend and Hashem are really one image, so to speak. On the river is the not to be careful in the honor of your friend. That's like disrespecting Hashem. And the measure of good is always more than the measure of punishment. These two, as Avos Yisrael, here we're talking being careful, but then we're talking about loving the Yid. These two an Ahava Bilti Mikbelos, to the extent that it will be a non-limited love, was bring to a Hanhoge, which leads to a conduct from a Chavet Zayin Chaverecho Betachlis HaZehirus, from honoring your friend with total careful. Is thus bepnimius, and the inside that Indian for Avos HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kovet Shemaim. It's a love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's the honor of the heavens. Kamayim Aponim Laponim. So, loving another Yid, honoring him is really loving Hashem and honoring Hashem. kamayim aponim leponim, and the face you show the water is the face you get back. This is megala avos HaKadosh Baruch Hu tzid. This reveals if you treat another yid with that love and respect, this reveals the avos HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the love of Hashem to yid, was bring safe. In the end, it brings to aromas kavod Yisro, to raising the honor of the Jewish people, afilu be'inei kol amei haaretz, even in the eyes of all the nations of the world. Bis to them kavod amiti, to the true honor, was vetzayin begilui, which will come down openly, begeula amitis v'hashlema, in the true and complete redemption, oidei Mashiach tzidkenu, through Mashiach tzidkenu, b'meidu v'yemeinu mamesh, speedily in our days. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Yisro, Tov Shin of Hey.